The Mary Celeste, a ship found drifting with no crew, true mystery for sleep. The ocean does not explain itself. The ocean is vast in a way that is difficult to truly understand. When you look at it from the shore, it appears calm, endless, and almost peaceful. But far from land, where the horizon stretches in every direction and the sky meets the water without interruption, the sea becomes something else entirely. It becomes quiet, isolated, unforgiving. For centuries, sailors have crossed these waters carrying cargo, dreams, and responsibilities. They trusted their ships, their instruments, and their experience. And yet, time and time again, the ocean has reminded humanity that it does not belong to us. It does not explain itself. It does not offer answers. Tonight's story is not about a violent storm. It is not about a battle at sea. It is not about a shipwreck. This is the true story of a ship that was found drifting calmly across the Atlantic Ocean, completely intact, fully seaworthy, and utterly abandoned. No bodies. No signs of violence. No clear explanation. The ship was called the Mary Celeste. In December of 1872, this American merchant vessel was discovered floating alone, her sails partially set, her cargo untouched, and her crew gone without a trace. Everything aboard suggested a normal voyage, and yet, every human presence had vanished. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has endured for more than a century and a half. It has been investigated by governments, maritime experts, scientists, historians, and writers. Logical explanations have been proposed, dismissed, and revisited. And still, no theory fully explains what happened aboard that ship. This is not a story meant to frighten you suddenly. There are no jump scares here. No shouting. No chaos. Instead, this is a calm, slow descent into one of the quietest and most unsettling mysteries ever recorded at sea. A story designed to be listened to in the dark, or with closed eyes, allowing the rhythm of the ocean and the cadence of the narration to carry you gently toward rest. As you listen, imagine the slow rocking of a ship on open water. Imagine the soft creaking of wooden beams. Imagine footsteps that once echoed through narrow corridors, and then stopped. The Mary Celeste did not disappear. She was found. And that is what makes this story so disturbing. So get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. And as the ocean stretches endlessly around us, let us return to the year 1872, to a voyage that should have been ordinary, and became unforgettable. A perfectly normal voyage. The Mary Celeste was not an unusual ship. She was not old, unstable, or poorly built. In fact, she was considered reliable. A brigantine, a two-masted sailing vessel designed for long-distance trade across the Atlantic. Solid construction. Experienced ownership. A ship that had made similar journeys before without incident. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste was prepared for another routine voyage. Her destination was Genoa, Italy. Her cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, tightly sealed and carefully stored in the hold. Nothing exotic. Nothing dangerous by the standards of the time. The captain was Benjamin Spooner Briggs. Briggs was not reckless. He was not inexperienced. He was known as a disciplined, religious, and cautious man. He trusted order. He trusted routine. And he trusted the sea only as much as one ever should, with respect, but never arrogance. Unlike many voyages of the era, Captain Briggs chose to bring his family with him. His wife, Sarah, and their young daughter, Sophia, joined the journey. This decision alone tells us something important. Briggs did not expect danger. He did not sense trouble. He believed this voyage would be safe. The crew consisted of 7 experienced sailors. Each man had crossed oceans before. They understood the isolation. They understood the risks. And they had accepted them willingly. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste departed from New York Harbor. The weather was cooperative. The ship handled well. The first entries in the ship's log were calm and unremarkable. Day after day, the voyage progressed as expected. The sails were adjusted with care. Navigation was checked and rechecked. Meals were prepared. Watches were stood. Life aboard the ship followed a rhythm as old as seafaring itself. Morning duties. Midday navigation. Evening quiet. At night, the Atlantic stretched endlessly around the vessel. Stars reflected faintly on the water's surface. The sound of waves brushing against the hull created a steady, almost hypnotic background. The ship creaked gently, as wooden ships always do, expanding and contracting with temperature and motion. Nothing in the log suggested fear. Nothing suggested panic. Nothing suggested urgency. Captain Briggs wrote letters during the journey. In one of them, he expressed confidence in both the ship and the crew. There was no hint that he believed anything was wrong. But as the Mary Celeste moved farther from land, small details began to emerge, details that seemed insignificant at the time, but would later be examined closely. The weather became inconsistent. Not violent, but unpredictable. Winds shifted without warning. Progress slowed more than expected. The ship did not suffer damage, but the voyage felt delayed. Still, nothing justified alarm. No storms were recorded that could explain catastrophe. No collisions were reported. No distress signals were sent. And then, sometime in late November or early December, the Mary Celeste stopped being a normal ship on a normal voyage. At some point quietly, without witnesses, every person aboard disappeared. Not during a storm. Not during an attack. Not during a wreck. They vanished from a ship that continued sailing. And for days, perhaps weeks, the Mary Celeste drifted across the Atlantic Ocean alone, carrying cargo, personal belongings, unfinished meals, and unanswered questions. The voyage had begun in order. And it would end in silence. Life aboard the Mary Celeste. Life aboard the Mary Celeste followed a quiet and disciplined rhythm. Days were structured not by clocks, but by light, weather, and responsibility. At sea, routine was not a luxury, it was a necessity. Every action had purpose, every habit provided stability in an environment that could change without warning. Each morning began with inspection. The deck was checked for damage, moisture, or wear. Ropes were examined carefully. Sails were adjusted to match the wind. Below deck, the hold was inspected to ensure the cargo remained secure. The barrels of alcohol were tightly packed, sealed, and stored exactly as regulations required. There was no indication that any had leaked or shifted during the voyage. Meals were simple but regular. The galley was small, functional, and always warm. Food was prepared in silence or quiet conversation, often accompanied by the constant background sounds of the ship, the low groan of wood, the gentle splash of waves, the faint whistle of wind through rigging. These sounds were so constant that sailors often stopped noticing them altogether. Captain Briggs was a deeply religious man, known for his calm demeanor and strict moral code. He did not tolerate disorder or recklessness. His presence aboard the Mary Celeste created an atmosphere of discipline and trust. The crew respected him, not out of fear, but because he led by example. His wife, Sarah, helped maintain a sense of normalcy, especially during the evenings, when the ship settled into a quieter state. Little Sophia, their young daughter, brought a rare softness to life at sea. Her presence was unusual on a merchant vessel, but not unheard of. She was often kept below deck, protected from wind and cold, surrounded by familiar objects meant to make the ship feel like home. Her toys, clothing, and personal items would later become some of the most haunting remnants of the voyage. The crew consisted of men who understood isolation. Long stretches passed without seeing another ship. Conversations became quieter. Thoughts stretched longer. At night, watches were taken seriously. One man always stood alert, eyes scanning the darkness for sails, debris, or changes in weather. Despite the isolation, there was no record of tension or conflict aboard the Mary Celeste. No arguments were noted. No disciplinary actions recorded. No signs of fear or unease described in the log. Yet, when examined later, investigators noticed something subtle. The ship's progress was slower than expected. Weather reports from nearby vessels indicated challenging conditions, not storms, but persistent headwinds and rough seas that made navigation difficult. These conditions did not endanger the ship, but they tested patience. Days stretched longer. Arrival felt farther away. Still, none of this explains what would come. There were no entries suggesting panic. No references to danger. No preparation for abandonment. The ship remained functional. The crew remained capable. Life continued as it had for countless voyages before. And then, at some unknown moment, that life stopped. Not gradually. Not violently. But completely. The discovery of the empty ship. On December 5, 1872, another vessel entered the story, the British brigantine Dei Grazia. The Dei Grazia was traveling toward Gibraltar when its crew noticed a ship drifting oddly in the distance. At first glance, there was nothing immediately alarming. Ships at sea often altered course. Sometimes they drifted while repairs were made. Sometimes weather forced strange navigation choices. But as the Dei Grazia drew closer, the unease began. The ship's sails were partially raised, but improperly set. Its movement was slow, unnatural, as though no one was guiding it. No signals were raised. No crew members were visible on deck. Repeated attempts to hail the vessel were met with silence. Eventually, the captain of the Dei Grazia ordered a boarding party to investigate. As they stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, the first thing they noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of calm seas, but the hollow absence of sound that comes when something living should be present, and is not. The ship was in remarkable condition. The hull was intact. The rigging showed wear, but nothing unusual. There were no signs of a struggle. No damage consistent with piracy. No blood. No broken equipment. Below deck, the scene grew more unsettling. Personal belongings were everywhere. Clothing lay folded. Boots rested beside bunks. The galley contained cooking equipment, food supplies, and utensils, all untouched. The ship's clock had stopped, but investigators later attributed this to seawater damage. The cargo remained secure. Only 9 barrels were found empty, a small number, and not enough to explain panic or disaster. Most disturbingly, the crew's personal effects were still aboard, including Captain Briggs' navigation instruments, including his wife's belongings, including the child's possessions. The ship's log was found, and its final entry was dated November 25, 1872. It placed the Mary Celeste near the Azores. There were no warnings, no emergency notes, no explanation for abandonment. One critical detail stood out. The lifeboat was missing. This suggested that the crew did not simply vanish, they left the ship deliberately. But why? The Mary Celeste was seaworthy. The weather was improving. The ship was not sinking. Abandoning a ship under those conditions was unthinkable. Investigators later theorized that Captain Briggs may have feared an explosion from alcohol vapors, prompting a temporary evacuation. But if that were true, why did the crew never return? Why take no supplies? Why leave navigation tools behind? The sea offered no answers. The Mary Celeste was escorted to Gibraltar, where formal investigations took place. Every explanation raised more questions. Fraud was suspected, then dismissed. Mutiny was considered, then rejected. Natural disaster was examined, then ruled out. What remained was silence. A ship that had carried life now carried only evidence of absence. A vessel that had not failed but had been abandoned. And a mystery that would echo across generations. Theories, fear, and the limits of logic. Once the Mary Celeste arrived in Gibraltar, the mystery moved from the open ocean into the structured world of courts, officials, and maritime law. What had been a quiet discovery at sea became an international puzzle. Every detail was examined. Every object catalogued. Every decision questioned. At first, suspicion fell on the crew of the Dei Grazia. Salvage rights were valuable, and some wondered if greed had motivated deception. But this theory quickly collapsed. The condition of the Mary Celeste showed no signs of violence or forced boarding. Nothing had been stolen. The cargo remained intact. The explanation did not fit the evidence. Attention then turned back to Captain Briggs. Those who knew him found it difficult to believe he would abandon his ship without absolute necessity. He was cautious, methodical, and deeply protective of his family. Leaving a stable vessel with his wife and child would have been a last resort, something done only under extreme fear. One of the most widely accepted theories centers on the cargo itself. Alcohol fumes. Industrial alcohol can release vapors that are invisible, odorless, and potentially explosive. Investigators suggested that Briggs may have feared an explosion below deck. Perhaps he heard a sound. Perhaps he sensed pressure building. Perhaps he imagined catastrophe moments away. Under that theory, the crew may have boarded the lifeboat temporarily, intending to stay close to the ship until the danger passed. But the theory raises troubling questions. Why take no food? Why leave navigation instruments behind? Why abandon the ship entirely? If the lifeboat had become separated, cut loose accidentally, or pulled away by currents, the crew would have been left helpless at sea, watching their ship drift beyond reach. Other explanations have been proposed. Some suggest sudden flooding caused by a faulty pump or miscalculation. But the Mary Celeste was not sinking. Water levels were manageable. No emergency repairs were underway. Others point to weather and sea conditions near the Azores, strange currents, optical illusions, disorientation. But even these explanations fail to account for the calm, deliberate abandonment. Then there are the theories that exist on the edge of reason. Mutiny. Piracy without violence. Sea monsters. Supernatural forces. These ideas persist not because they are likely, but because logic leaves gaps. And when logic fails, imagination fills the silence. What makes the Mary Celeste unique is not simply that the crew vanished, it is that they vanished without chaos, without damage, without explanation. The ship did not scream. It whispered. And the whisper has echoed for more than a century. Silence, memory, and the ocean's secrets. Today, the Mary Celeste exists in memory rather than reality. The ship itself was eventually lost to time, weather, and neglect. But its story remains, floating quietly through history like the vessel once floated through the Atlantic. What lingers is not terror, but unease. The knowledge that a normal day can end without warning. That routine can dissolve into mystery. That the sea does not announce its intentions. When we listen to stories like this, something inside us slows. The mind begins to wander. The questions repeat softly, without demanding answers. What would you have done? Would you have trusted the ship? Or feared what you could not see? The ocean has always been a place where certainty fades. Even now, with modern technology, ships vanish. Planes disappear. Signals stop. And explanations arrive incomplete. Perhaps the Mary Celeste is not a story about fear at all. Perhaps it is a reminder. A reminder that control is an illusion. That silence can be louder than disaster. That sometimes, nothing happens, and that is what unsettles us most. As the ship drifted, waves continued to rise and fall. The sun still rose. The stars still appeared at night. The world moved forward, unaware that a mystery was passing quietly across its surface. And tonight, as you listen, you are doing the same. Drifting. Floating. Letting the story move past you. You do not need answers to rest. You do not need conclusions to sleep. The ocean keeps its secrets, and you can let them go. Allow your breathing to slow. Let the silence settle, and drift gently into sleep. Just as the Mary Celeste once drifted into history.